What's up, Flesh and Blood family? We are back with another King's Table $35 budget deck tech. Today we're taking a look at Riptide, the Fishboy Ranger from Outsiders. And again, welcome. If this is the first time you've watched one of these videos in the series, or, we definitely thank you if you have seen a couple of our others before this. As always, we are trying to, for as little money as possible, either set new players up or established players just looking for a cheap way to explore a new hero. Trying to set you up with an excellent way to, show up to an armory, win some games, win some promos, and do it for a little bit of money. Big victories, little money. That is always the goal. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Take a look at Riptide. Riptide is coming in with 19 health and 4 intellect. There are 2 abilities on Riptide. One, whenever you play a card from hand, you may put a card from your hand face down into your arsenal. And then the second one is whenever a trap you control triggers, deal 1 damage to the attacking hero. Now, we do have a suite of traps in this particular build to help trigger that, to help, deal some damage to your opponent. This is in the Blitz format, so it is always a good thing to be able to chip away damage. But the primary focus of this build is going to be go again attacks, go again arrows, just trying to be as aggressive as possible. There are a number of different Riptide builds out there. There's some really spicy ones that use like Talishar as the weapon. So definitely, if you're interested in Riptide, look around, see what's out there. There's a couple different approaches to Riptide, but we're going to go with a more aggressive style in this build. So let's go ahead and let's take a look first with our equipment. Now, there's a lot of stuff here. Don't let that be intimidating. I'm really just trying to play around, give you some options, give you some reasons and ideas to test out some different things, and then, see what works best for you. So let's take a look at, we'll start with weapon and quiver here first. So there's a bunch of different bows that Rangers have access to, and being a huge Azalea player myself, I'm really big on Death Dealer. I really love Death Dealer. You get to pay a resource, and if you have no cards in your arsenal, put an arrow card from your hand face up into your arsenal, and then if you do, you get to draw a card. So I love Death Dealer for that reason. Sure, you have to spend a resource, but then you get a card right back. And generally, at least, again, in something like Azalea, I'm able to pitch things that I want to see later in the game. Just pitch those to pay for Death Deal, and then I get to draw something that might be a little more relevant now. That's not something, super spicy that I want for later in the game. But Death Dealer is really great for essentially getting that resource back that you've just spent, because you're getting to draw a card. And if you look up here, we are running 30 reds, 5 yellows, and 5 blues in this deck. And so most of the time, it just sort of feels like a one-for-one swap, and you have something in your arsenal. But again, with Riptide's ability, there's going to be lots of other opportunities to put something in the arsenal using that Riptide ability. And so that's just something to consider as well when you're choosing your bow. But then we also have Dreadborn here. Again, very similar to Death Dealer. You pay a resource, put an arrow card from your hand face up into an empty arsenal, and then if you do, that arrow is going to gain +1. But really, with Dreadborn, it's this second portion here that is super helpful and can actually be pretty devastating depending on your matchup. So it does say arrows you control have defense reactions, can't be played from hand, this chain link. And that affects a lot of different heroes out there that are, digging deep and running a lot of those D-reacts right now. So again, 2 different options for the bow. Try both of them out. It's definitely going to be dependent on the matchup, but you have a lot of flexibility and a lot of range there just with those 2 bows. And then I've also included 2 different quivers. Riptide's quiver is the Driftwood quiver. At instant, you can destroy it and then put a card from your arsenal at the bottom of your deck. So if something got arsenaled that you need to cycle out, or maybe you arsenaled something and then drew something that was more relevant. I mean, there's a couple different situations where that could come up, but it's an option, right? Like it's Riptide specialization and it's a token rarity. So if you've opened any Outsiders packs, there's a good chance you might have one. Give it a whirl, see if it's helpful, but I think the quiver you'll probably run more often is going to be the quiver of Rustling Leaves. At instant, you pay 3 resources, you reveal the top card of your deck, and then if it's an arrow, you put it face up into your arsenal and destroy Quiver of Rustling Leaves. In all honesty, the times that I've played the budget version of this Riptide, this, what we're looking at here in this video, there's so many different ways to get things into the arsenal that I haven't really found myself using either quiver much. But you have the opportunity to take it, and obviously if there's something that you want to put in your equipment inventory, because again, this is Blitz, so any sideboarding is going to be done in the equipment. If there's something that maybe is more relevant that you want to switch out for, only carrying one of these quivers, then that's totally valid. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at equipment. Unless you're going against something where you need the Arcane Barrier, primarily what you're going to be running all the time in this budget version, you'll be running Blossom of Spring, just to destroy, gain a resource. It is, obviously, it's not Spring Tunic, but it is going to give you the resource when you need it the most to close out a game, to fire an arrow after you play a bunch of buffs, or, whatever that might look like, but it's great resource generation for the exact moment that you need it. We're going to be running the Mask of Malicious Manifestations. You can spend a resource and put a card from your hand or arsenal on the bottom of your deck, and then destroy it, and then you get to reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal an attack action, and then you get to put it into your hand. So this is similar to the cycling out of arsenal that we talked about with the Driftwood Quiver. Worst case scenario, you just get a block for 1 with it, and I think that is, especially in Blitz, is still relevant and still helpful. So primarily, I think you're going to be using it for the 1 block. That's at least what I found with this card. But if you need to get out of a sticky situation and try and find something else, find another attack that's more relevant, then you have this available to you. For the arm piece, we are running one of my favorite pieces of Ranger equipment, Bullseye Bracers. You're going to get Arcane Barrier built in, so you're not going to have to sideboard anything for like a Wizard matchup or something. And then you get to destroy it. If you've got nothing in your arsenal, you can put an arrow face up into your arsenal, and then it gains +1. This is just going to be an opportunity to reload an arrow if you're doing a really wide turn and you're throwing lots of arrows at your opponent. If you already utilized Riptide's ability, you've utilized your bow, this is just another option to load something in and give it a +1. And then lastly, for the regular equipment you'll be running most often, we are looking at the Snapdragon Scalers. This is, even in my competitive Azalea, this is something that I'm running. It's just such a good piece of equipment. You're just gonna, as an attack reaction, destroy it and give target attack action with cost 1 or less, go again. And so it's gonna be super relevant. There's a lot of stuff in here that you can chain together with other pieces of the puzzle for those big wide turns. And this just allows you to do that and allows you to get those big devastating combos. And then for the Null Rune, for the Arcane Barrier that you might need if you're going against, like a Wizard or something, then we're running the Null Rune Hood and the Robe. I think that the Snapdragon Scalers and the Bullseye Bracers are typically, especially because Bullseye has the Arcane Barrier built in, they are typically the pieces of equipment you're going to most frequently need in a game. It's just, you don't want to let go of those, so it's just the easiest to swap in the Hood and the Robe. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the deck itself. Let's start with the Riptide, sort of the second part of his ability that's going to be dealing, those little 1 ping damages when traps trigger. And this is going to help him stay alive long enough to do the big arrow turns and help disrupt the opponent's plan. So we are running a couple different traps here. We're running 2 copies of Boulder Trap. This is going to trigger if it defends an attack with attack value greater than its base, and it's going to put a -1 counter on equipment. Like I sort of mentioned earlier, especially in Blitz, equipment and equipment's block ability is just so relevant in Blitz that this can be incredibly devastating if your opponent doesn't like to block much, but what they do block with is their equipment. That this is going to help you punch holes in that and allow you to push damage through because you are helping to take out their equipment. One copy of Pendulum. This is going to trigger when it defends, and the attacking hero has played or activated a reaction this chain link. You get to throw the top 2 cards of the deck into their graveyard. 2 copies of Tar Pit Trap. If it's defending an attack with Go Again, then the next time an attack action card hits this turn, the effects don't trigger. That can be super devastating against a lot of different heroes. It can be shutting off some, Go Again and combo shenanigans with ninjas. It can be shutting off a Bolton shot with, an Alexi or an Azalea matchup. And so we're running 2 copies of this because that Go Again is pretty easy to get to trigger. And then we can actually, in the budget build, because these cards are not that expensive, we can fit all of the Riptide specializations. So we got Buzzsaw. This is going to, when it defends an attack with attack value greater than its base, the attack can't gain attack this turn. Super awesome. And then we're running Collapsing Trap. When it defends an attack with Go Again, the attacking hero discards their hand, then draws that many cards -1. This can be super devastating if someone has set up and has done everything necessary to give themselves, the hand that they need to combo off. You can just make them get rid of it. And so Collapsing Trap is incredible. And then also Spike Pit. This is when it defends and the attacking hero has played or activated a reaction this chain link, put the top card of their deck into their graveyard. They lose X life, where X is the number of cards in their graveyard with that name. And so this is going to be something maybe... honestly, with all the games that I have played with this deck, I haven't gotten to get Spike Pit Trap off much, but when it works, it works. Otherwise, it's still a 3-pitch, 3-block. It's still a trap that has potential to do some good stuff. So, like I said, there's no reason not to run the 3 legendary Riptide traps, because they can fit within the budget and they can fit within the deck without really messing up anything else. So then what I want to cover with this deck as we approach the rest of the deck list, let's go ahead and let's talk about, because obviously one of the main portions of a Ranger is arrows. So before we get into the arrows that we're running, we will just sort of cover any buffs that are in the deck and any non-arrow attacks or generic actions or anything like that, and then we'll wrap it up with the arrows that we are running. So we're running 2 copies of each of the Lace Widths. They are 0 cost plus 3 buffs. They're just too good not to run, and especially if you were able to attend Armors in the last couple of months and get the extended arts, and they just look so good, right? Like you want to use all those really beautiful promos, but anyway, it's hard to beat a 0 cost, plus 3 attack. And what's really nice about these as well with Riptide is that as far as loading an arrow into the arsenal to fire, it's as simple as just playing one of them, remember, because of Riptide's ability. So we have the ability to play one of these buffs, load in an arrow, and then fire the arrow if that's, how the turn is going to go, or, if we're going to do some other shenanigans after that. But that's why I really love running, 2 of the Lace with Blood Rots, Lace with Frailty, and Inertias, because with Riptide's ability, you can really pull off some crazy things. And then if this is the first time you've seen these cards, they're all +3, and then when it hits, the Lace with Blood Rot will give them a Blood Rot, give them a Frailty, and give them an Inertia, respectively. And then for... we're running 2 copies of Ravenous Rabble because, again, to help enable... There's so many reds in this deck that this is more than likely going to come in for a 4 quite often. And this is just going to help build those really wide turns. And so your opponent has to decide, am I going to devote resources to blocking a Ravenous Rabble, or are they going to be firing, an infecting shot at me? Or are they going to be firing an arrow that has hit... with a Lace with Blood Rot or something. And so it really forces your opponent to decide. And so best case scenario, they devote resources to blocking this, and then they can't block your crazy on-hits. Or, they don't block this, and then it's just damage through. And in Blitz, you only have to chew through 20... 20-ish, depending on the hero, 20-ish life. So still tons of value in Ravenous Rabble, and that's why we're running it in this deck, just to provide those options for your opponent to decide where they wanted to, put defensive resources. And then 2 copies of Release Attention. It's another 0 cost +3 buff, and it does say that your next arrow defense reactions can't be played from Arsenal this chain link, so it just continues to help push that damage through, and any sort of tools that your opponent might have to deal with those arrows, we're trying to remove those tools from from their available options. Running 2 copies of Scar for a Scar. Depending on who your opponent is or your hero is, if they're starting at 20 life or 22 if you're Valda, then you're automatically going to have less life than them because you started 19. And so it's going to be, usually in most scenarios, pretty easy to get Scar for a Scar to have go again. And again, just like Ravenous Rabble, this is it forces your opponent to make decisions, to devote blocking resources, and then it also is going to give, or it also has go again, so you have an opportunity to just have one more thing you're throwing at your opponent that turn. 2 copies of Seek and Destroy. It's another 0 cost +3, but it does say if this hits a hero at the beginning of their next end phase, they discard all cards in their hand and destroy all cards in their arsenal. And so, even more so, I mean, I love this card in Classic Constructed. I run it in Azalea, and I do think it is a great buff because, when you look at similar things like Inertia, say, that is just putting those cards at the bottom of the deck, but Seek and Destroy actually forces the opponent to discard any remaining cards in their hand and cards in their arsenal, and so that can be incredibly powerful, and it's just another 0 cost +3 that's going to help with the Riptide ability, load in arrows and shoot big arrows. And then Take Aim. As I mentioned earlier, depending on how wide you're able to go in a turn, with a ranger, you need to have multiple ways to get arrows into the arsenal to fire them. And so we have the Bullseye Bracers, we have access to the bow, we have access to Riptide's ability, but just in case, I also wanted at least, one card in here that has reload, so we're running 2 copies of Take Aim. It's another 0 cost, +3 buff, and then it does have the reload ability. So, I mean, even just playing this card would trigger Riptide, so you could put something in your arsenal, but you never know, right? There's enough out there, whether it's something like Humble or Sleep Dart, there's cards out there that remove, or let's say you get Dishonored, right? The Katsu card, or I guess it's a ninja card, but it's Katsu. There are enough ways out there to erase your hero ability that you still want something just in case to be able to load arrows in, and Take Aim is a great way to do that. It's a great little backup. And then the rest down here are just traps, but there is one final non-arrow thing I want to cover down here, and that's 2 copies of Captain's Call. This card, worst case scenario, it's a pitch 3, and it's going to help you pay for some other things that you're trying to do, but this is just another go again enabler. We need, when I was sort of testing and playing this deck, I needed just a little something extra to help with the go again, especially because we can only use the Snapdragon Scalers once. And so this is really great. It's just a generic action, and you can choose, really either one could potentially be relevant, but this is primarily here for the go again. So when you play it, your next attack action card with cost 0, you can either give it +2 or you can give it go again. Generally, like I said, we'll be giving it go again because we have other ways to buff arrows and stuff. But if you want to throw a really giant arrow at someone, then you could still, utilize that +2. But we're running 2 copies of the blue Captain's Call just to help with more go again enabling. And so let's go ahead and let's talk about our arrows, and then I guess I'll actually start with Death Touch because it's not an arrow, but it has to be played from Arsenal. So in my mind, I always just loop it in with arrows. And then we'll kind of look at some sample hams, and then we'll, wrap up. And as far as the arrows that we're running, I really wanted to stay with sort of 0 cost and 1 cost stuff. We want this deck to be really efficient. I didn't want it to be resource heavy, and when you're dealing with rangers and you're dealing with having to fire things out of arsenal, too many arrows or too many attacks that that cost resources can sort of throw off that resource curve a little bit and maybe sort of ruin the efficiency. And that's not always the case, right? It depends on the ranger. But in this particular aggressive, go wide, go again build for Riptide, I wanted to stay with a lot of 0 and 1 cost. So we're running 2 copies of Red Bolton Shot. Bolton Shot is incredible. It's a 0 cost arrow. It does defend for 3, and then if its attack is greater than its base, it has go again, and if it hits, then you get to reload. And so that's just another opportunity to throw something down in your arsenal to be able to fire off. Bolton Shot is an incredible ranger card. I absolutely love it in any ranger build, and so we're running 2 copies of the red one. 2 copies of Death Touch. Again, this isn't an arrow, but like I said a second ago, I just kind of loop it into the arrows because it needs to be played from Arsenal. And this is one that you can easily load in with Riptide's ability. It is going to cost 1, and it's going to come in for 6 attack value. But when it hits, you can choose a Frailty, Inertia, or Blood Rot and create that under your opponent's control. So it's just super devastating, and especially in especially in Blitz, those Blood Rots towards the end of the game can close out the game for you. So we're running 2 copies of that. 2 copies of the red Drill Shot. I really love Drill Shot. Sometimes what can happen with Drill Shot, and I had to do this a bunch of times when I was first learning how to play Ranger. But you look at this card and you think, oh, putting a -1 counter on an equipment, that's pretty powerful. And then you see aim counter right here, and you just kind of, your brain just forgets all that stuff in the middle. I'm like, oh, you need an aim counter. Every time I would try and recall Drill Shot, I'd be like, oh yeah, you need to aim counter for the -1 counter on an equipment. But you don't. And maybe that was a little more intuitive for other people, but for me, it was just this thing where I had to just constantly read the card. It's like, oh yeah, it doesn't need the aim counter. So Drill Shot is incredible because blocking for 3, costs nothing, it's coming in for 4, but also, when it hits, you get to put a -1 counter on a piece of equipment your opponent controls. And again, like we talked about with -1 counters earlier, that can be absolutely, devastating in Blitz when you want to try and get as much block value out of your equipment as possible. So I love Drill Shot for that. And then we are also running 2 copies of Falcon Wing. Falcon Wing was an arrow that came out in Outsiders. It is a 0 cost, and you could put an aim counter on it to put +1, but we're not really dealing with aim counters in this deck. And so the primary thing here is that it has built-in go again. And so depending on the turn, depending on what you have in hand, Falcon Wing could be a really good first arrow to fire. Make your opponent sort of deal with and consider 3+ damage, depending on, if you put a buff on it or not. But then that go again is going to enable you to fire something potentially more devastating afterwards. And then 2 red Infecting Shot. It's going to cost 1, come in for 5. And then when it hits, you're going to create the Blood Rot Pox token. Blood Rot, again, is just an excellent token. And being able to just deal damage or force your opponent to pay the 3 resources can have some pretty devastating effects in the Blitz format. And then running 2 copies of Murkmire Grapnel. This card, I've kind of gone back and forth on a little bit, but I actually really like it in this build because the damage can't, damage that would be dealt by it can't be prevented. Now, it can still be blocked, but it can't be prevented. And so, sure, there's still things like Oasis Respite, but you don't have to deal with, things like Sink Below, because it's going to help go around some of those prevention effects. And in an aggressive style Riptide like this, I've actually found that to be actually quite a helpful thing. And then the last arrow, that's the last arrow and the last card we need to cover, 2 copies of Red Widowmaker. This arrow is absolutely fantastic. I think I might, maybe I like it more than other people. I don't know. I absolutely love it in Azalea, so of course I wanted to try it out in Riptide. The fact that defense reactions can't be played to its chain link, it only costs one, and if it's defended by fewer than 2 cards, it does have +3. So then the decisions really start to get piled on your opponent. And if you're just firing it off, for 4, it's not been buffed or anything like that, it's still good. I still really like the card. It's one of my favorite arrows personally. But when you're able to buff it, if you had a crazy turn where you could throw, a lace with blood rot and a release the tension or something like that in front of this, you really force your opponent to make some difficult decisions with what they want to give up to block. And I think it's just an incredible card for that reason. It can, absolutely swing games in, the Blitz format, and it just provides some really devastating amounts of damage that your opponent has to deal with. So let's go ahead and let's take a look now at a couple of sample hands, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this video up. Again, with our, with these deck tech videos, we just like to pop in Fabrary here in the draw 4 section, just to get some sample hands. It's not perfect. We don't have an actual opponent we're playing against, but it just sort of helps, help us see what we can do. Now, this would be one where we really wish we were running Death Dealer, because there's a whole lot of nothing in this opening hand. So, let's pretend we were running Death. Well, no, that wouldn't even... Yeah, this is interesting. This is a bad hand, and if you had this, then I would really hope that you were going second, so you could at least try and get rid of the Boulder Trap and try and defend with some stuff to be able to draw up. So this was hilarious. This might be one of the worst hands I've ever gotten in one of these, the sections of these videos. So we're going to just go ahead and we're going to pretend like that didn't happen, and we're going to draw a couple more. So here's what I would maybe suggest. This hand, you could probably do something. Honestly, I would probably go ahead and I would probably pay the resource for Dreadbore. I'd throw the Murkmire in the arsenal, and I'd probably just pitch the Pendulum Trap to do that. Once Murkmire was in the arsenal, I would go ahead and fire it. If your opponent... because it would feel a little bad to crack Snapdragon so early, but because of what else is in your hand, you could potentially present a lot of damage just right away. So I'd fire the Murkmire. If my opponent, blocked it out and devoted a lot of resources to blocking it, then absolutely, I would crack the Snapdragons, I'd play the Seek and Destroy, load in the Widowmaker from Riptide's ability, and then with the remaining resource on Pendulum Trap, I would fire the Widowmaker. It would be coming in for 7 or 10 if they defended with fewer than 2 cards. And so that's a ton of damage you're just presenting right away with that. So that's an option. That's probably how I'd play out that hand. And again, some of my later decisions in the turn depend on what the opponent decided they wanted to do with Murkmire. A turn like this, this would be a very straightforward turn. I would even, again, let's say that this is a turn where, we hadn't cracked the Snapdragon. Because again, this is just for illustrative purposes. We just like to sort of show what interactions could exist. So let's say we had the Snapdragon still active. I would go ahead and play the Seek and Destroy, or the Take Aim. Either one. I think maybe the Seek and Destroy and Death Touch combo could be a little more devastating. But either way, Take Aim, throw in the Drill Shot, and then fire the Drill Shot, and then crack the Snapdragons to give it go again. Then go ahead and play the Seek and Destroy. And then if you had the Blossom of Spring and not the Null Rune up here, then you'd crack the Blossom of Spring to gain a resource and use that resource to fire the Death Touch. And that Death Touch would come in for 9 with a bunch of on hits. So that's another option, another, way to sort of see some of these interactions. And, the thing with Ranger, if you're a new player, if you haven't played a lot of Ranger stuff, at least it was this way when I was learning Azalea, because I had already played a bunch of Ranger before I picked up Riptide. Maybe it's the same learning experience, but I had to lose a whole lot, and I had to see a whole bunch of different hands with different card combinations. I had to play the deck a lot before I got to the point where I felt comfortable with my options, before I felt comfortable understanding how to get things in Arsenal, how to fire them out of Arsenal, and how to make them devastating enough to actually win games. So I would encourage you, if you are a new player or someone who is diving into Rangers, diving into Riptide for the first time, I just want to encourage you, every single loss is an opportunity to learn, and only by playing a Ranger over and over and over again, and I know this might not sound fun, but playing a Ranger over again, no matter how many wins or losses, seeing all the cards, seeing all the combinations and the ways to play out hands, is going to be worth it, I promise. Rangers are a ton of fun, one of my favorite classes in the game, and once I figure out how to do it well, I will be doing an Azalea version of the $35 deck tech series. That one is a little more challenging because of some of the staples that she requires, but I think this Riptide build is a ton of fun. It has some real viability, and give it a try. I hope it's something that is enjoyable to you, and I hope that Ranger is a class that you fall in love with. Now let's wrap it up with the pricing information. $20. FAB says it should be around $20. A lot of this stuff might even be, outsiders bulk that your friends might have. If you go to an outsiders draft, you might walk away with a bunch of this stuff. Who knows? Even if you start your journey in Flesh and Blood with a Riptide Blitz deck, I believe it has quite a bit of this stuff that is in here. And so you might not even reach the $20. And so you might have some options to do some upgrades. I would recommend, if we're talking upgrades, maybe consider something like Trench of Sunken Treasure could potentially be an option. It is not a very cheap legend, or not, no, it is very cheap. It is a very cheap legendary, and it allows you, sort of like what we talked about with the Driftwood and the Mask, it allows you to cycle stuff out of your arsenal, but gain a resource in doing it. And so at least getting out of a sticky situation, or getting out of, having to change your game plan and need to get something out of your arsenal, you at least get a resource in return. So, that could be an option. That could be a budget pickup for that. You could also look at picking up something like Remorseless. That is an arrow. They do tend to be pretty expensive per copy, but defense reactions can't be played from Arsenal to their chain link, and then if it hits a hero until the end of their next turn, whenever they play an action card, they lose a life. So Remorseless is a really solid arrow, and it's something that Riptide has access to, and two of those will run you about the entire copy of this deck. Actually, no, I think one of them might run you the entire copy of this deck. So, definitely upgrades to consider for later down the road. But I hope that this helps you start your journey into the world of Rangers in Flesh and Blood. As always, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe. Find us on Twitter at King's Table Games. And, we love talking about Flesh and Blood. We love talking about getting new players into the game, finding good ways to do that, finding budget-friendly ways to do that. So, as always, thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, night, whatever time of day that you're watching this. And hit us up. Let's talk some Flesh and Blood. And that's it. Thank you so much.